Okay, hi everybody out there. This is Garth Reader. I'm the race commissioner for Grand to Grand. Have been for a while. A little bit of background on myself. I've been an athlete for most of my life. I started out as a swimmer and went through high school swimming. After that, I took up triathlons in the 80s and 90s and did that for a while, and then just focused on bicycle racing for a while. Later on, I switched over to ultra running, probably about, I don't know, 20 years ago. And 12 years ago, took up stage racing and have been doing that ever since. That's sort of my niche right now where I really enjoy racing. And that's why I'm involved with Grand to Grand, is to give back to that community.
Yeah, it's awesome, Garth. Like, as long as I can remember, since I've been involved with G2G, you were there. So you're just, to me, you're an integral part of the system here.
Yeah, I ran G2G first time in 2014 and have been volunteering ever since. So
Nice. It's awesome. So you definitely have real world experience, but also a lot of knowledge about the course and the rules.
right. Yeah. I've raced all over the world at stage racing, and have participated in various other organization stage races. So I bring a little bit of perspective from how Grand to Grand fits in and with regards to rules and regulations and requirements.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, and I mean this in the nicest way, we get into running and it's like, it's a very simple sport. Like when I got into running, so you just go out and run, right? Like it's pretty basic. It's not like you're going to go like do something that's like tennis that has like all these rules and whatever. So you go out and you run and it's super simple, right? But then if somebody's interested in Grand to Grand, you look at the rule list, and you're like, well, there's a lot of rules. And the rules are there for a specific reason. It's not just to like pigeonhole people into doing certain things, right? Like there's an actual purpose behind all these rules, correct?
Right. And in reality, there's several reasons for rules. First and foremost is to keep it fair. I mean, everybody has to participate according to, a set of requirements. And that way there's no advantage for certain groups or people over others. Okay. Another important set of rules that exist are those focused around safety and risk management. Required equipment. You can look back at over just recently at stage races and other races where there's been terrible things happen because there wasn't sufficient required gear. Okay. Another set of rules, parts of rules, are there to enable a participant to succeed and finish the race, believe it or not. They're there to help you. They're not there to cause you grief. Okay. Like you said, people that are transitioning from running to stage racing, it's different. It's not just, put on your shoes and go run. There's a lot of thought, planning, and understanding about the environment and what you're about to set out to do. And some rules are there to help the competitor finish the race and not drop out. Okay. Another small section of rules are there to support the ethos of Grand to Grand. The digital detox. We want the participants to live in the now, where they are now, and not be sucked into the metaverse during the week that they're out there. So that's part of some of the rules also.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. It's like the rules are there like for your safety and then also for your enjoyment too, to like help you have a better experience.
Right. And Grand to Grand, these rules have been developed, modified, clarified over the years. So it's a work in progress. Pretty much almost every year there's minor rule tweaks that come out, and in certain cases, like we've added the supported category, there's a new set of rules to help address that category. They're only minor in nature, but and they complement the other rules and regulations that are there.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I guess now having a supported and an unsupported category, the rules need to adapt to that because you can't have the exact same set of rules for essentially two different types of racing.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But overall, the rules like on mandatory equipment, your minimum calories and things like that, they're the same across both categories.
Cool. Awesome. Like, yeah, speaking of like just rules that kind of apply to both supported and unsupported, a couple people sent me some questions they wanted some clarification on about the rules. So one, I think the first one would be like the blinking lights. Like in the rules, I don't remember which section is exactly, but it says that you need a red blinking light for like, specifically for the long stage, but also for people that are finishing in the evening when the lights or when the sun goes down. So like, what's the reasoning behind that? And like, when do you actually need to have your red blinking light? Is it every day or is it only in those certain situations?
Well, for supported runners and actually for everybody, that's a piece of safety equipment. You need to have it with you at all times, just like having a headlight with you at all times. You never know what might happen. The red blinky light is being able to identify you from far away. The course does cross roadways or goes along roadways, so it's just a logical, rational safety piece of equipment. When the sun goes down, the lights come on. That's just how it is. It's just like your car. A half hour before sunset, you're supposed to turn on your lights, right? Same thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like I've done plenty of races where I'm out at night, and it's like if you don't have a headlamp, obviously you're kind of screwed. But then also if you don't have a red blinking light, like you could potentially like if you get lost, like no one's ever going to find you. You could just be wandering around the desert
Right,
forever,
right,
especially
yeah,
where Grand de Grand takes place.
right, yeah, and it's quite rational kind of thing. You mentioned the headlights. If you don't even have headlights, there's a reason why you have two headlamps required because one can fail. We've seen that happen before. And so if you're out in the middle of the Utah desert at night and with one headlamp that fails, uh, there's two is one and one is none.
Exactly. Like I remember
Yeah,
actually, years ago I ran a 100K race. It was a really long, hard 100K, and most people would finish in the dark. And I was like, I'm not going to need like a backup battery for my headlamp. That's stupid, but it was in the rules. So I brought it, and lo and behold, I needed that second battery because something happened. I think my headlamp had turned on, so like my initial battery drained, and I had my backup
yeah,
with me. So and I needed it for sure.
yeah,
And so I
yeah.
was glad I followed the rules and had that with me. And but it was also just like, oh yeah, that's why those rules are there. It was a very validating
Right.
experience for the rules.
That pretty much everything that can happen has happened in these races. So anyway,
Yeah, that's a very good point. Another
yeah.
question too, then, like thinking about how like there's always like a DNF, right? No matter what race you do, people are going to drop for either like medical reasons or just things happen. But like with Grand to Grand, where people are self-supported, they're bringing all their own food. And so like, let's just say like I were running Grand to Grand and like stage 3, I drop out, but I still have those extra 3 days of food left. Like, what can I do with that food? Like, is it, I have to take it home with me or can I distribute it among runners or like what happens with that?
Well, okay, so you sort of hit on it. This race is a self-supported race if you're running in that category. And as such, if there's a drop, there's two options. One is if you're leaving the race at that point in time, you can take it with you, right? The other is, and this is a little more, um, it happens a little more often, is people bring excess food that they don't want anymore. And what we require then is that you turn it into the commissioner here for disposal. You're not to share amongst the competitors or hand out extra food. That's muling, plain and simple. You've carried that food for somebody else. And if you're self-supported, that you're no longer self-supported if you're eating somebody else's food. If you're racing in the supported category, you should have plenty of volume and capacity to carry your own food, so there's no need to take other people's food. if they no longer need it.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. Like the whole like concept behind Grand to Grand is like do a challenging experience that you're supporting yourself for the most part. So it is muling essentially. Yeah, like if
Yeah,
so and so drops and they give you 3 days worth of food and maybe you guys had planned that out like or
yeah,
something ahead of
and
time, it's like this straight up
yeah,
cheating.
it's a quite honestly, it's a huge advantage because people are caloric deficient after about the second or third day, and having thousands of extra calories available is not fair to other people.
Yeah, 100%. Like it just makes a lot of sense like thinking through it now out loud with you.
Hmm.
So I guess thinking of like people like obviously get behind on calories, and that is a reason that people have dropped in the past and like even just like gone slower than they had planned for. So like there's cutoffs every day for every stage and then for every just every stage in general. So like what's the reasoning behind the cutoffs? Is it to make people move faster, to make your job easier, or is there an actual safety aspect to that rule?
It's a combination thereof. First and foremost, it is somewhat of a safety issue. We don't want uh, people out on the course way into the night all the time. The aid stations, checkpoint personnel need to get back and reload for the next day to go out and support the rest of the racers. Um, Also, the cutoffs are designed in such a way that if you're not making them, you're probably not going to finish the event. So it's better to know that sooner rather than later. Now, with that being said, the cutoffs are quite generous. And if you basically could almost walk the entire distance to make the cutoff. If you're struggling to meet it for whatever reason, fatigue, foot issues, whatever, medical, gastrointestinal issues, you, you, they're there for your safety and to keep the race going and not have everybody spread out across Utah.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And thinking about that though, like a lot of people, I know we just spoke about like lights and everything, but a lot of people who are out like pushing cutoffs every day, they spend a lot of time in the dark, which is totally fine. But at that point, they're burning a lot of headlamp batteries. So is there a way for them to recharge at camp every day?
No, self-supported. If you think you're going to need excess power, bring extra batteries, bring solar charger. We've seen all these battery packs to recharge from. It's your call. Um, one sort of tip or comment on that. There is a minimum lumen requirement for headlamps, but many headlamps today far exceed that. And even with the improvements to headlamps over the decades, you're still burning a lot of power. You don't need 1,000 lumens to run this race. You can do it on 200 easily. So more is not necessarily better, particularly if you're going to be spending a lot of time out in the dark. You got to balance the amount of light you have and the amount of burn time you have available.
Yeah, I think that's another fun logistical challenge about a self-supported race is like one, you have to figure out your food and your pacing and everything, but then like, all these other little things as well. Like, okay, so batteries, do I need to bring 3 batteries, 2 batteries, 1 battery? Am I going to push the cutoff and then maybe get a penalty and not have a light or something? Like it's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. It's stage racing is all about balance, optimizing weight, performance, those types of things. It's for an engineering kind of person, it makes a lot of sense, but for others, it's a little foreign concept.
Yeah, that's definitely for sure. And like at Grand to Grand, you see people that are just creative minds, like engineering type minds, mathematical minds. Everybody's from these different backgrounds, and it's interesting to see how they compete in the race and like pack their bags and do things because everybody's so
Yeah,
different. I find
yeah,
that all really fascinating.
yeah. It is. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the pack rules because you were mentioning there's like now a supported category along with the unsupported, and the
Right.
rules are slightly different. So like, what are the new pack rules for the supported category?
For the supported, basically for those who don't aren't familiar with this, it's a category where instead of carrying all your equipment for the entire event, the racers can have a one bag transported from camp to camp with most of their gear that they don't then carry during the day. Now, they still will be required to carry all their food for the day, their safety equipment, and all the other mandatory gear, water capacity and all that for the day. But basically, their sleeping bag and their pad, any excess clothing that they have, all the rest of the food for the event will be transported for them. This is a great option for those that have never tried stage racing before and want to sort of get their toes in the water a little bit, so to speak, to see what this is like. Because as you just mentioned before, this is complicated and there's a lot of learning that goes on associated with stage racing. And having a little bit of margin there to allow you to pick up this knowledge while not going all in with it is great. There is, however, limits. We don't want a supported runner bringing, everything and the kitchen sink with them. So as such, that bag they move, their total weight that they can have is 12 kilos, 26 pounds about. So they get a sense of trying to figure out what's important, what's not important, what to bring, what trade-offs they'll have to make. Am I bringing camp pajamas in my fuzzy slippers, or should I throw in an extra 500 calories? That kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's also like, you're saying it is kind of like entry level, but it also can be very fun just to run a race that way where like you know how much you need to pack each day for each distance and you're not carrying everything with you. So like they're basically two different events in a lot of ways. Like it's the same, but different, right?
Right. I've been to other races where there's supported categories, and those are the front of the packers just duking it out too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that sounds awesome. So let's talk about water because like, if anyone's ever been out to like northern Arizona, like southern Utah, like water is a scarce resource, and I think like most people see from like stage like basically 2 to the finish, like there's a lot of greenery out there, like the junipers and the pine trees and stuff, and they're super green. But it doesn't mean there's a lot of available water on the course. Like there's been one year or a couple of years where there's been some flash flooding and a little bit of water out there, but for the most part, you're not going to run into much water. So like, why do we have water rules at Grand to Grand, and like, what are the importance of those?
Well, again, it's a combination here. First and foremost, you're required to carry or have the capacity to carry at least 3 liters of water with you. That may seem like a lot to some people, but quite honestly, if you're out in the desert environment where temperatures can exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit or 35 Celsius, 30 Celsius, and you're moving slow between checkpoints, that's barely enough. I remember when I did 2014, I had one instance where I ran out of water about a quarter mile from a checkpoint. It happens. I mean, and that rule there is first, one, for safety, and two, help you finish the race. Now, there's other rules associated with water, mainly in camp. Water is distributed using 5-gallon jugs, and there are calculations have been done, and there's plenty of water available for your drinking and eating needs. Okay. There is not water available for bathing and washing clothes, et cetera, et cetera. And we run into problems almost every year where competitors are doing this. Yeah, it's one thing to dampen a little rag and wipe yourself off or get sprayed down with the spritz bottle, but washing your clothes out every day, no. Water is a precious resource, particularly in the desert, and we want people to understand the importance of water. And so this goes almost to an ethos kind of thing for this race, and have people understand that they can live with less water than what they normally do. You've always noticed some people just turn on the faucet full blast while they brush their teeth for 3 minutes. Okay, you don't need to do that. You can turn the water off, then brush your teeth for 3 minutes, turn the water back on. So it's getting an understanding of the importance of water and how it plays into the desert society.
Yeah, kind of touching on that. Like, it's interesting last year after the race, like doing interviews with people and just talking to participants at the after party. Like, how many people mentioned that they realized how little they actually need in real life to survive? Like, most people come from a fairly comfortable home and like we're working, doing all these things. We don't really think much about like our water usage or even just like calories and things that we eat every day. But when you're out like living out of your backpack for a week, you really realize like, yeah, I don't need that much water to survive. And you learn how to ration things properly. And it's a really
Right,
interesting way to
right.
learn that concept.
Yeah, and clothing too. I mean, typically your race packs wind up being about half weight of food and half weight of gear. And most of that gear weight is made up of your sleeping bag and your pad, your sleeping system, and maybe a jacket or spare socks. All the other accoutrements, a fork, pair of sunglasses, little first aid kit, blister kit. Really not that much that you need.
Yeah, that is 100% true. So let's like touching on that then. Let's talk about like the calorie rules for the race every year because I think people either look at it as like that's not enough or that's way too much, and people pack appropriately based off their personality. So like I know you have some interesting stories from that, but like first off, like what is the point of having a rule for the number of calories, and then what are some funny stories or interesting stories you've had over the years of that?
Right. So, Eric, it's really sort of interesting because I've been doing this for so long to see the evolution of what people believe or their rationale, their strategy for calories. When I first started stage racing, most stage races require 2,000 calories a day minimum, 14,000 ish overall. And that's what Grand to Grand requires, minimum. But if you look like on the back of the package and it tells you calories for, your potato chips or whatever, and it says percentage of the recommended daily allowance of 2,000 calories. 2,000 calories a day is the couch potato lifestyle. Sitting on the couch, not doing anything physical. That is the minimum you need metabolic wise to exist, basically, on average. Okay, remember this is an average. Individual results will vary, right? So that 2,000 is what you need just to hang out and camp. It doesn't count all the physical exertion of going 170 miles over the week. Now, early on, people would, I have 14,023 calories. Okay, great. And guess what? They're hungry and their performance suffers. Over the years, we've seen a switch in this attitude to people bringing more food than the minimum. Most people usually bring more calories than the minimum. And some people actually bring excess and they wind in, jettisoning it along the way. It is a personal responsibility to figure out what you think you're going to need. Okay. You can ask questions of other racers and people in the know and trainers and nutritionists and et cetera, but it's up to you to figure it out. And we have seen a lot of DNFs for people that didn't have enough calories. We've seen penalties associated with people that didn't bring enough calories. They hang out on the long days after the long stage and they're hungry, and they eat all their calories. And then they don't have enough to make it the minimum requirements for the next stages. You got to do a little bit of planning, a little bit of thinking on what you're doing there. Okay. And so it's better to err on the upper end as opposed to the lower end. The layout of how we measure calories is done based on weight. It's very generous and advantageous to the racer. But those are spelled out very explicitly in the rules and regulations. If you have questions, forward them on and we can talk about it. Now, there's one little aspect that's a little different than normal stage races. We measure calories at the finish of a stage, not at the beginning of a day, which is a little different. I came up with that methodology several years ago because there was so much confusion. Well, how much do I need on the last day, et cetera, et cetera. And it makes a little more sense to measure when you finish crossing the finish line after each stage. So look over the regulations in there. It's very specific. It spells it out, how many calories, how much weight when you cross the finish line each day.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. So let's talk a little bit about the new rules for this year. And we kind of touched on them already for the supported, but are there any new rules for supported and, or I guess, unsupported this year?
No, pretty much everything's the same. There is a relaxation on taking videos, but again, I encourage people to review all the rules and regulations. Ignorance is not a defense. It's incumbent upon you, the participant, to understand the rules and regulations. And yeah, it's dry and no fun to read, but looking through those, you'll get a sense of, what's required, what's mandatory for your safety. There's things there that are, for fairness. As I said before, there's rules there to help you finish. Okay. So look them over. You have ample opportunity for clarification. You can send emails. You can ask your fellow competitors, but it's incumbent upon you to read and understand them. Period. That's just how it is. Okay. Following the rules is easy, and it's not there to cause you hassle. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean, there's some people that believe they can get all their calories from the air, and don't need to wear shorts when it's 40 below, and they think that their abilities exceed the requirements. But many people don't comprehend about grand to grand. It is in what we term out here the high plateaus or high deserts. I mean, the race starts at 3,500 feet, over 1,000 meters, and it goes up to over 7,000, 7,500, 772, around 2,500 meters. It's high, and it can be very, very hot, and it can be very, very cold. it snows, it rains. As you mentioned, Derek, there's flash floods. The environment is very unforgiving. And so understanding, the requirements for like sleeping systems and jackets and rain gear and things like that are important. Um, Another area where we get a lot of questions on is the sleeping bag. Does my sleeping bag meet the minimum requirement? Well, I think people need to do a little bit of research on their own and understand um, sleeping bag rating. 32F or 0C extreme rating will meet the requirement. That's the minimum requirement. What does an extreme rating mean? It means you wear clothes and you won't freeze to death. That's what it means. That doesn't mean you're going to get a nice comfy rest and recover from running 50 miles when you're caloric deprived for over 4 days. Maybe it might be a good idea maybe I should have a 32-degree comfort rating on my sleeping bag or, a lower limit. So these are the kind of things you need to look into, particularly when you're buying equipment for the first time for stage racing. Ask questions, do some research, and in the end, it'll be money well spent and time well spent.
Yeah, from a personal experience, years ago I bought a really light sleeping bag. I'm like, oh, it's rated down to 34 degrees. Like, I'm gonna be totally fine. And then I remember the first time I took it out, it was like 50 degrees at night.
And you
And I,
froze.
and I froze because the temperature rating wasn't like your comfort rating. And I was like, oh man, I made a giant mistake.
And then people are stuck with that for 5 more nights,
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say definitely like just my little bit of advice right here is to like look at the rules, but then test those things beforehand because everyone's a little bit different. And like maybe you made a mistake and bought the wrong bag, and like it makes a huge difference at night. Trust me.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. So as we kind of wrap up here, Garth, let's just say like what is your one big tip for people running Grand to Grand? You've been out for many years at the race, you've done stage races yourself and ultra runs. So like if you could give one piece of advice to somebody who's looking to sign up, what would it be?
I would say do your research. You can't, stage racing is one of these sports, even more so than ultra running, in that it's a very personal thing. What works for you does not necessarily work for other people. So when you see questions out there like, what's the best color of sock to buy? Well, whatever color works for you, or what shoes, or what sleeping bag, or what food, or how much. Uh, this is a learning experience, and you will continue to learn as if you do more and more stage races. And uh, new people to the sport now have a huge advantage in that they can go to many resources and get a feel and sort of bound everything. When I started out, there really wasn't too much on the internet about this. There might have been one or two books written on the subject. Uh, you did research by looking at photographs and trying to find out things and did a lot of experimenting, a lot of training runs with and trial and error type stuff. So do your research and don't be misled into believing that what worked for somebody else will work for you.
I think that's a very good advice. Just try things out, spend some time experimenting on your training runs, like nutrition, camping wise, like gear wise, everything, just that we have a better experience. And it's not just to, kind of quote unquote, waste your time out there. It's like, so you have a good time at Grand Grand because it is a really incredible place and a special place to a lot of people. And if you prepare properly, you're going to have a good experience. And that's what everybody wants.
One final comment or tip. There is a rule that says all your equipment and food must be labeled. And we have so many people that don't do this. And they, at check-in, spend an inordinate amount of time labeling all their equipment and gear and food. It may seem to be a real esoteric kind of requirement, but unfortunately, we do take very seriously loss of equipment and littering in this event. Permits could be put in jeopardy if there's litter associated with the event on public lands and on private land. And so that's why the rule is there for marking and the penalties, associated penalties associated with littering and loss of equipment. And I know in some cultures and in some places this is sort of foreign, but in others it's standard practice. So please pay attention to that rule and regulation and the regulations, and you will have a much more enjoyable check-in time.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Garth. That was really interesting to hear about the rules. Like, it's honestly more interesting than it could be. Like you were saying, reading the rules can be kind of dry, but it is very important. And knowing the rules and the regulations will give you a better experience. So thanks again for your time. That was awesome.
Well, thank you. And I hope I see a lot of you guys out there this coming year. Train smart, run smart, and we'll see you in September.